looked at my bank account in disbelief. There was no possible way this could be happening. Last Friday, I got my regular 2-week paycheck from my job. In about a month, I needed to come up with the third rent payment for my new apartment. Friday was 7 days ago. I was at an all-time financial low. Luckily, thanks to my incredible wife's good sense, we were about a month ahead on rent, but I didn't see how this was in any way sustainable. We could probably scrape by another month, maybe 2, but then what? This was the poorest I'd ever felt in my entire life. This was about a month ago. Hi, it's me, Sanjoy, and this is where I'm at right now. I bet there's a lot of you guys that can relate to what I'm feeling, and hopefully this video can kind of act as a sort of catharsis for us to identify and sift through our feelings. Let's be honest, being poor sucks. It's not just the pit in your stomach when you check your bank account. It's not just the embarrassment when your card gets declined at the grocery store and you have to put your stuff back. It's not just the terror you feel when you're with your parents at the restaurant and you're wondering if you can really even afford to sit in the seats. It's the feeling of being trapped in a system where it seems like you have to have money to make money. It's the frustration of watching your life tick away hour by hour at your dead-end job while your kids grow up without you. It's the desperation when you wonder what you're doing wrong and how everyone else seems to be doing just fine, but month after month you're just scraping by. It's the shame when your in-laws ask you why you haven't put your family in a house yet, and isn't it about time by now? It's the awkwardness when your mom asks if you heard back from that job interview yet, and you don't know what to say because it's just another no. There are a lot of reasons why people end up here, and it's easy to look at someone's situation and say they did or didn't deserve it, but at the end of the day, around 10% of the United States population lives at or below the poverty threshold, and this is in one of the most economically prosperous countries in the world. That's over 30 million people in the US alone. So I don't think I'm really going out on a limb here when I say that there should be plenty of people that relate to my situation, and plenty of you probably have it way worse than I do. So what does a person do in this situation? Well, I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers, but after spending some time studying and reflecting on this is what I've learned. For those of you who are familiar with this channel, you'll know that I use it as sort of a meditation ground to sort things out and record and remember concepts of life as I learn them. One of the philosophies that I identify with that has helped me to make sense of life is Taoism. One of the main principles of Taoism is the principle of Wu Wei, or doing by the act of non-doing. This can also be thought of as going with the flow. I've covered this topic extensively in other videos, but in thinking about how this concept applies to being poor, I realized something important. Resisting the struggle is really half the struggle. Let me use an analogy to explain what I'm talking about. Imagine a situation where you are forced to run a distance race, but you don't know how long it is or where the finish line will be. Of course, the physical element of the challenge would be difficult, because running long distance is physically taxing. But the added mental strain of not knowing how far you will have to run adds a whole new element to the challenge. We like to feel in control of things. We like to know how long the meeting will be, when school will end, how long before we have to start a project. If you were in this situation, it would be easy to get discouraged and give up, until you learn the principle of getting into a rhythm. Instead of speculating on the location of the endpoint, or how much more you can take, you could take solace in the repetitive noise of your footfalls, the continuing rhythm of your stride, the maintaining of a steady, even pace. You can enter an almost trance-like state by doing this. Andy Puddingcombe, the inventor of the popular meditation app Headspace, spoke of this experience during his time as a monk in Asia. Once, as punishment for breaking the rules, he was directed to mow the lawn with nothing but a pair of scissors. For the first hour or so, he was fuming and ruminating on the stupidity of the task. As the time dragged on, something began to change. He says, "At some stage, I think I remember just kind of laughing to myself at the absurdity of it. Through having let go of that storyline and that tension, all of a sudden I was kind of released from that story. The activity was what it was. I got to define the experience of that activity by how I was relating to it with my mind. In the monastery, you're constantly challenged. If you're sweeping the floor, are you sweeping the floor while thinking about something that happened in the past? Or hoping something will happen in the future? Or are you simply present with the sound and the sensation of the broom? It's such a simple idea, but if it's done repeatedly over time, it really has a transformative effect on the mind." The first time I heard him relate this experience on a podcast with Guy Raz, it really affected me. The truth is, There's honestly no reliable way to know things like when will you ever stop becoming poor, or when will your business take off, or when will the economy improve. So instead of trying to draw imaginary finish lines and getting frustrated when they don't pan out, why not just lean into the experience, learn to be fully present in the day-to-day, truly experiencing the rhythm of what you're doing and the joy that is available to you right now. If you've been poor long enough, chances are, whether or not you realize it, you believe to some extent that your life would be better if you had more money. You might think that money will change the way you feel. Nobody can be blamed for this. Almost every message we get in today's society is that more money equals more happiness. The truth is, money in and of itself doesn't actually make you happier or unhappier. Of course, if you woke up one day with $7 million sitting on your bed, some aspects of your life would undoubtedly change. But let's not get hasty and assume that it would change the way that you feel, at least not in any lasting way. Consider something for a moment. What does being poor feel like to you? I mean to you personally. Does being poor feel like desperation? Does it feel like being trapped? Does it feel like fear or anxiety? When you run up against the feeling of being poor, try to identify exactly what feelings it brings to the surface. If you really want to have your mind changed, take 5 to 10 minutes to sit down and write these things down. Ask the question, what does being poor feel like to me? And write down anything and everything that comes up. I recommend pausing this video to do this exercise before moving on. Now, once you've written these feelings down, take a look at what you've written and ask yourself, will more money stop me from ever feeling this feeling again? Really reflect on this question. If being poor feels to you like anxiety or terror, do you think that if you made more money you wouldn't find something else to be anxious about? If poverty feels like being alone or left out, do you think that you would never feel alone again if you were rich? Really reflect on this for a moment. The world is full of rich and poor people who are both equally miserable for one reason or another. Sometimes, especially for someone who has never been wealthy before, the experience of suddenly coming into a lot of money often ends up leading to a living hell. You can see this with music stars or actors that suddenly hit their big break and are sucked into unsustainable, unhealthy, miserable lifestyles as a result of suddenly being loaded up with more cash than they know how to handle. Of course, this isn't to say that every rich person is doomed to be miserable any more than any poor person is. There are miserable rich people and miserable poor people. Conversely, there are exceptionally happy rich people, and there are exceptionally happy poor people. Being happy is far less about the circumstances you find yourself in than it is about how you learn to identify with it and frame those circumstances. The place you are right now is the exact place the universe has put you in, and that cannot change simply by wishing it so. If you can't learn to be happy now with less money, you will not magically become happy with more money. Money is a reflector of what you already feel. In either scenario, you will not learn to be happy until you learn to radically accept and find gratitude in your current position. When I feel up against a wall, my go-to has become to think of 3 things that are good about the situation that I can be honestly grateful for. This not only helps me to find peace in the situation, but it helps me to calm down and to clearly identify what to do next. The topic of gratitude honestly deserves its own video, because it would be way too expansive to dive into here. So maybe I'll make one in the future, but suffice it to say, for now, that in my experience, it is absolutely impossible to find joy or to be happy in a circumstance without finding gratitude in some way. My next and final tip is to seek specific ways to add value to other people. Now, what do I mean by adding value? Well, what is value? When you look up value on Google, it says the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. So my third tip for being happy in tough financial times is to look for very specific ways that you can provide somebody else with something important, worthwhile, or useful. Why is this so important? Well, let's look at how the universe works. We live in a universe of mirroring. That means that what we put out comes back to us in some form or another. Some people call this karma, or whatever goes around comes around. But it's more than just an exchange of good and bad deeds. That means that the attitudes we hold reflect back to us. That means our greatest fears manifest in our physical reality in ways that aggravate them more. That means we end up with friends that think like us and act like us. The concept of mirroring will probably need its own video too, so I'll plan on making one about that in the future. But for the purposes of this video, suffice it to say that since this universe acts on the principle of mirroring, if you project only desperation and scarcity out into the world, that's what you will receive back. Additionally, you need to learn to operate from a mindset of abundance rather than a mindset of scarcity. You will never be able to transition yourself from manifesting scarcity to manifesting abundance if you do not learn to think abundantly. And possibly the best way I know of to do this is to start focusing on adding value to the world in any way you can. When you focus on providing value, you take the focus off of yourself and your problems. You expand your perspective and can get excited about having a meaningful contribution to the world. A good way to start is by listing everything that you consider yourself to be good at. Think of something you can do that harnesses these talents. If you need help identifying things that you're good at, you can ask someone you trust for help. You can also just start with things that you just plain do, even if you don't feel that you're particularly good at them. I started this exercise myself recently because I felt that I needed to start making an effort to provide some value to the world. It was really difficult at first because I felt a bit like any talents I did have were not relevant or beneficial to the world at large, or I felt unable to execute on them. 3 of the things I added to the list were talking about things in an entertaining and educational way, writing, and making videos. I suddenly realized that by starting to make weekly videos on my channel again, I could utilize 3 of the things on my list. And it was something that I found pretty enjoyable as well. Chances are the things that you take for granted are the things that you're best at. They probably don't seem very remarkable to you because you find them easy. If you can find something that you're good at and find a way to provide value to the world using that thing, you will bring yourself from a space of scarcity to a mindset of abundance because you are focused on creation instead of scarcity. If you continue to do this, you may even find that people provide value back to you as you provide it to them. Just make sure that you keep the focus on adding value, not on trying to get something in return. Well, this about wraps up the thoughts I have on being poor. I hope this video helps someone else as much as it helped me to just kind of reflect on this and put my thoughts into words. Just know that you're not alone in experiencing what you're experiencing, and know that nothing in life is permanent. I don't really like struggling financially either, but by learning to accept and find gratitude for the place I'm in right now, and by putting my focus on providing value for others, I'm learning that I really can be poor and happy at the same time, and I know you can too.